Hello, I'm Dr. Orlando Landrum with Cutting Edge Pain Relief, and today I'm honored to have a guest that's going to talk about supplemental therapy, particularly for regenerative medicine, but also for pain relief. And we're really going to kind of get into that nuanced understanding that is sometimes kind of a cursory overview of supplements help or supplements don't help. But really, what we want to kind of delve into, how can this be specific, particularly for patients that are looking towards regenerative medicine solutions, but also for those individuals that have pain. And so I'm going to talk to Alex Tollington, who really has impressed me with his knowledge and degree of expertise of being able to understand the various different differences. So for instance, I'll have a patient come to me and they'll say, hey, I take turmeric. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you take turmeric with? Is it a good type of turmeric? Well, how much turmeric are you taking? How much should you take? And many people are like, I don't know. So that's what we're going to be answering today. And again, I'm honored to have Alex as a guest, and I'd like to welcome him to our channel. Thank you so much for joining us. Alex, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Dr. Landrum, how are you doing?
I'm good, very good. So today, obviously, we're going to talk about supplemental therapy. And, as I was saying, you are phenomenal in this area. You've really been able to help me get some better understanding about supplements. So let me just ask you, just straight off the bat, can you give me some of the major differences between supplements?
Sure, absolutely. Well, the first place really to start off with is the difference between professional supplements and what we would see in the industry as retail supplements. And actually, the small channel I work in, which is with medical professionals like yourself, is really known as nutraceuticals. So this is like professional nutrition that's targeted. And really what we do is we look at quality of raw materials, sourcing of those raw materials. It's so important to make sure that, first of all, they're pure, they are therapeutic in their grade. And the second part of that is to test to make sure that they are actually what we say they are. And I'll give you several examples of that. For example, quercetin, which you may or may have not heard of. It's actually a mast cell stabilizer in the body. It also has some great antiviral properties as well. We've regularly get batches of a high quality grade material called quercetin dihydrate into our facility. It is derived from inner white oak bark, and every time we test it, it tests great. But we've had batches in the past that have come in and they've tested 80% quercetin. And when you start analyzing that quercetin and realizing what else is in there, there's outer white oak bark in there as well. Now, a lot of retail brands would just put that in and away you go, and it's in the bottle. What we do at our company, which is Ortho Molecular, is basically if we find anything that's not up to specification, it's disposed of. In fact, it's not even returned back to the client because we're concerned they'll sell it to somebody else. And that's really the difference between professional versus retail grade. So back to you for more questions.
All right. So I appreciate the little give back right there. So why would someone need supplemental therapy if they have a diet that's really robust and that we would assume would be sufficient? Can you give us an idea about that? Because I have a number of patients that ask me that. They say, you know what? I eat really healthy. Do I really need a supplement?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I spent the first 32 years of my life just eating healthy. Didn't concentrate on supplements at all. But the reality is that if you look at our diets here, modern day, and what we consume, those diets tend to be very low on minerals and essential B vitamins and things like that. They used to be higher, actually. And the reality is we're just over farming our soils, over farming our lands. We used to do something called crop rotation, where you would have one field sitting and then that sitting field would change to another sitting field, and then it would change to another sitting field year after year. And you'd also rotate crops on those different fields year after year as well. And so the soil would get a rest, the cows would go and eat the grass on that field. And then, I know it sounds gross, but they would drop their feces on the soil, and that lovely, beautiful cycle would continue of minerals being put back into the soil. Unfortunately, what we're doing these days is almost raping the land of those minerals. And so really what a diet looked like back in 1910 compared to 2010 is extremely different. And the more we keep doing that, the less minerals we get in our food. So it's becoming very, very important now to start supplementing even just the basics. Why? I mean, and I know we've talked about this in our meetings together, but we're made up of little cells, our bodies. And if those cells don't have the minerals and the vitamins that they need to do their functions properly, then you're not going to feel very good. You're not going to heal quickly. You're not going to bounce back to health as quickly as you would before. And hence, foundational nutrition and filling those gaps where there are gaps is becoming more and more important, actually. It's part of the overall picture.
Okay. So what are some of the best supplements for pain relief, especially for muscle and joints?
Sure. No, absolutely. You can approach this a number of different ways. Obviously, for pain relief, we really want to work on certain inflammatory pathways. And so, common one, and you'll see it all over the internet, you'll see it everywhere, is turmeric. Turmeric. I will just tell you now, turmeric that you put in your frying pan is so different to what you'll get in a capsule that we manufacture. Just to give you an idea, if you look at the curcuminoid content, which is one of the active compounds, it's not sometimes wrongly so concentrated on, but it's one of the active compounds. In the frying pan, it's about 5%. So you've got to consume quite a lot. If you look in the root itself, it's about that as well. Now, one of the mistakes actually that the industry as a whole has been making over the past 15 to 20 years is they've been hyper-focused on the individual components of botanicals, fruit extracts, and ignoring the rest of the fruit or the herb or the root. I mean, you look at something like turmeric, it's been used in Chinese herbal medicine for 2,000 years. Ayurvedic medicine as well, maybe arguably longer than 2,000 years. And they've had great success with it. And one of the things that the professional channel and the retail channel has been doing, wrongly so, and it's starting to come back around now, which is great, is they've been focusing on just the parts of those raw materials that have a therapeutic effect. And guess what? We're now finding out that the rest of the parts of these herbs also have a therapeutic effect as well. So when you look at turmeric, it's really a mistake just to standardize completely down to the curcuminoids. Yes, the curcuminoids are a very active compound, and standardizing to some of them, and standardization, by the way, is making sure a certain quantity or percentage of that raw material is within that material that we put in the capsule, essentially. But if we ignore the rest of the compounds that are in the turmeric root, maybe we're missing out on something. And it's very interesting, but we're finding out now that, yes, you need those other compounds as well. And in turmeric, that's 235 other compounds that we know of so far that also have beneficial anti-inflammatory effects. So if you are going to be introducing turmeric into your diet as part of an anti-inflammatory and for your muscle health, make sure that you're getting a good quality turmeric that contains the oils. It contains the other compounds as well, not just the curcuminoids. So that's the main one. Turmeric. Yeah, hi.
I got a question.
Yeah.
So as I think about this, I have a number of patients that talk about its utilization, particularly with black pepper. And I think you have some comments about that. And so before we talk about collagen or chondroitin, can you give us some ideas about what your thoughts are in regards to that?
In terms of black pepper, wow, very interesting indeed. Yes, you will see a lot of articles on the internet stating you need black pepper to absorb turmeric. It's all about absorption, absorption, absorption. Get more black pepper in your diet. A few concerns really surrounding that. Primarily, the first concern is that black pepper has an effect on our phase 1 detoxification pathways in our liver. And phase 1, for those of you who know, it's referred to as like biotransformation phase, but it filters things out of our blood. And one of those things that it filters is medications and drugs. And black pepper actually has an effect, I believe it's on the 3A4 pathway. And if you consume too much of it, you can potentially not be able to detoxify certain medications. So that's a big concern to me, because especially if a patient is just using a black pepper off the shelf, I'd be very surprised if they're checking to see if it's having any interaction with their medications. So absolutely make sure it's checked, and make sure you're passing it past your medical professional. The other thing is, just diving onto that black pepper thing, it's not all about absorption. And I know that's going to sound really odd, because every website you read will talk about absorption, absorption, absorption. But we are now discovering that a lot of these herbs and these raw materials actually have a great impact on our gut, on our microbiome. And some, if not most, of their mechanism of action can actually be happening in the gut as well. So in the case of turmeric, yes, we know it has an effect at cellular level. It turns off something called NF-kappa B, which is it's like turning off a big hose pipe for inflammation in your body. But if we can also reduce inflammation in the gut at the same time, especially with our Western diets with high inflammatory foods, then you get this double effect. So when we just focus on absorption only, we're missing this whole wonderful part of herbology and this whole wonderful part of how supplements actually work in the gut. We're almost, if you think about it, applying the drug model to a natural raw material, and that's wrong. That's not how it's been done over the years. That interaction is important. It's how we would get it in nature as well. So do you want me to move on to a little bit about chondroitin a little bit?
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about chondroitin and collagen in that context of pain relief. But I think what I like to highlight is what you just mentioned is, so historically, we've either been just completely, let's go holistic without having the science behind it, or we've been science and we've been kind of isolationist and compartmentalized in that context. So to understand what we're getting when we're doing true natural elements and how to be able to have with an intent, I think is a really unique piece of what your company in particular really lends to, saying, how can we be able to do supplemental therapy with a broad approach that really attacks the body in the way that nature would normally provide benefit, but with an understanding behind it. So I think that's really unique and something that, is an interesting approach and has been helpful for me, particularly as a traditional MD, to be able to see a different way of thinking and how that can be able to help people. But yeah, if you could definitely talk about chondroitin, and you could talk about collagen and talk about why that might be helpful for pain. And the other thing is, I'd like to circle back around to that. One question is, so, I mean, I can find chondroitin for sure at Walmart. I know I can. So why should I pay, this versus I can get $3 chondroitin at Walmart or at the dollar store? Let me know. Yeah,
absolutely. And again, it boils down to raw material quality. And you can look at me and think, well, he's just saying that, it's raw material quality again. But I'll give you an example with chondroitin glucosamine sulfate. Both of them, in fact, those two raw ingredients, as a company, we procure them all the way from Spain. And you'd think, why would they do that? Why would they procure those raw materials from Spain? And the reason is because the company that we procure them from uses an enzymatic process to break down. So they literally use enzymes to break down those raw materials so that we can get them into a supplemental form for absorption in the body. In this case, we are looking at absorption, by the way, with this product. And so when you actually look at absorption of chondroitin glucosamine sulfate, both of those two raw materials, particle size is extremely important. And actually having a very consistent small particle size is extremely important. When you look at most of the chondroitin and glucosamine sulfate or individual raw materials on the market, they're often broken down using acid. And what that does is it creates, it can be very effective in some cases, in other cases not. And that's the problem, is lack of consistency. And so when we are looking at something for use in a therapeutic setting, as an actual treatment or part of a treatment schedule, we want something that's consistent. It's research-backed, consistent every single time, and it's going to deliver results. And we know it's going to deliver results. When you have various particle sizes between batches, and the patient doesn't know that what the size of that chondroitin and glucosamine sulfate is and whether they're going to absorb it or not, then they're going to get very frustrated when they take one batch and it doesn't work, two batches, it doesn't work. The third batch, I think I felt something, but then they go on to the fourth batch and it doesn't work again. And so that really boils down why it's not working. And I know that there's probably a lot of you out there that are watching this thinking, I've tried chondroitin glucosamine sulfate in the past, it didn't work at all. And I just challenge you, did you use a raw material that was broken down with the acid process? Most of these manufacturers won't even tell you that it's been broken down. So have a chat with Dr. Landrum and get him to set you up with something that's actually going to be absorbed and actually going to make a difference. And just on that note, give it 8 weeks, some cases 12 weeks with that raw material. It takes time. The way glucosamine and chondroitin sulfate work is chondroitin feeds directly in, and then glucosamine sulfate basically gives precursors to what they call glycosaminoglycans, which is one of the 3 arms that are essential for our joints, essentially. So it just takes time, is what I'm saying, for those raw materials to be used by the body and build up things like cartilage in the knees and things like that. Talking about collagen, so we're going to shift on to another thing here, because collagen is one of those things that's a bit of a rave in the market right now. You know, you've got things like CBD oil, that's a big rave. Collagen's another rave. And so a lot of people that are watching this have probably been marketed to by various different collagen companies. I know I get them in my emails all the time. And collagen, you can buy it off the shelf for very, very inexpensive. And again, what you're buying off the shelf compared to what you get in a professional brand is extremely different. And namely, if you were to look at like our collagen, for example, it all boils down to something called specificity, which is basically using raw materials that are targeted. And so we're using type 1, type 2 collagens in ours only. We're not using type 3, type 4, type 5. And the reason why we're doing that is because a lot of the patients that are watching this, you know, if they've got muscle tears or joint pain, muscle tears need type 1 collagen. Joint pain needs type 2 collagen. And so what we want to be doing is being very, very specific on what we provide, rather than providing the patient with a bunch of collagens that they might really not need therapeutically. The other thing that boils down with those, again, is particle size again. And so in the case of a collagen, is it a peptide or not? Have they broken it down into peptides, i.e., are they able to actually cross over into the bloodstream directly? Because if they don't, they're just going to get broken down into amino acids in the gut. And hey, I mean, if you're low on amino acids, you'll probably feel good after taking some. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that when we're using a collagen product therapeutically, what we're trying to do is stimulate things like tenocytes and chondrocytes directly. And that's why the collagen product that we have.
Hey, Alex, I think you've done a phenomenal job of breaking it down. Can you explain to our viewers where tenocytes and chondrocytes are?
Yeah, so chondrocytes being in the knees, in the cartilage. Well, it's basically in the joints, really. So think about them in the cartilage area. And then tenocytes, think of them in like muscle fibers and things like that. So we're directly stimulating those. which is unusual, really, when you think about it. And a collagen you buy down the supermarket, it's just not doing that. So back to you.
Okay. Are there certain supplements that are good for inflammation? And then in that context, can you, if you're using supplements daily, maybe have a better overall result than you using anti-inflammatories like NSAIDs, assuming that you had the right supplemental therapy? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so we brought up turmeric earlier. It's arguably, if you can handle turmeric, and I know that some people have food sensitivities to it, which is really annoying. My wife is one of them, so it's arguably one of the best raw materials for inflammation. And when you look at how it's working, yes, it's working in the gut, first of all. Secondly, it works at cellular level, and it basically inactivates something called nuclear factor kappa B, or NF kappa B. It downregulates that. And again, that's that master regulator for inflammation. The other benefit of turmeric is it works on something called the NRF2 pathway. And I like to think about that from a couple of points of view, but really it increases your antioxidant status in your body. And so they're doing actually a lot of studies into the NRF2 pathway. It's one of the more recently discovered things to see how they can activate that with certain drug therapies in the future. But we actually have raw materials that do it already. So let's just use what God's given us, what nature's given us. But by activating that NRF2 pathway and increasing antioxidant status, what it does is it actually shifts you into a less inflammatory status in the long run as well. So you're less likely to suffer from chronic inflammation. It's really chronic inflammation that drives a lot of these disease states and causes us long-term issues. So when we can take raw materials that pull that down in the future, it's far better than being on something like an NSAID. Now, if you look at how an NSAID works, it's a COX-1, COX-2 inhibitor. So it's working on two inflammatory pathways, essentially, and just blocking them off like any drug does. I think of drugs as blowing up the highway. You're going down the road and it's not there anymore. Supplements and the way you eat and dietary, it's like creating off ramps. It's a little slower, but in the long run you'll get the same result, and sometimes a better result because the highway is still there. So when I think of NSAIDs, yeah, you know what, they have their place. They really do, especially for like short-term acute injuries. But when they're used in the long run, they can cause some damage to the stomach lining, and they're really not very good for your health in the long run. So if you can use a natural approach and you benefit from it, why not? It's just much lower risk. That's how I see it. So.
Okay. So, Alex, we're going to take a quick break just to kind of pub our channel here a little bit. And then when we come back, one of the things that we're going to talk about is there are a number of stem cell formulations that are out there on the market. And really what we want to be able to help is our viewers understand what are some of the key ingredients that would actually provide them value. And we're going to talk about that when we come back in just a quick second.
Oh.
Hello, I'm Orlando Landrum, the owner and founder of Cutting Edge Integrative Pain Centers. And today we are talking about supplemental therapy for inflammation, for pain, as well as for regenerative medicine. And we have the good fortune of having Alex with us here, who's talking about supplements and particularly high-grade supplements, and really how do some of those things work. And one of the questions that we're posing that we really like to understand is, for those formulations that tout being good for stem cells, what we want to know is, so what really should we be looking for if we're really looking to be able to help improve that characteristic? Alex, can you help us with an answer for that?
From an oral stem cell point of view, I personally don't think it works very well. That's why you exist. So I think more about nutrition around keeping the cells healthy. So if you're going to be introducing stem cell therapy to somebody, what can you do to make that therapy as effective as possible? And so really, I think more around mitochondrial health. Mitochondria are the little powerhouses that are actually in some of our cells, not all of them, but most of our cells. And they produce something called ATP, which is energy. And of course, if you're not producing enough ATP and energy, you're not going to heal as quick. And so stem cells are not going to work as well, or stem cell therapy is not going to work as well. So when I think about stem cells, my brain goes to, what nutrition can we introduce into this stem cell therapy in order to get better results with that stem cell therapy? And so we're looking really, let's support the mitochondria with things like acetyl-L-carnitine, make sure the B vitamin status in that individual is good enough, make sure their mineral status is good enough, and then have they got sufficient antioxidants to deal with any reactive oxygen species that may be produced, because once you increase cellular respiration, you create more antioxidants. You've got to deal with them. So that's how I look at stem cell therapy.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So to that end, you kind of mentioned that context of overall health.
Yeah.
So what are some of the best supplements, even if they're not quote unquote sexy, for overall health that one really should be looking at that will help not only with pain, but just regular maintenance of continued good health?
Absolutely. When it comes to supplements for overall health, it's not flashy at all. In fact, extremely, my views are probably extremely dull and boring. So excuse me, sorry, but I think magnesium is one of the biggest deficiencies that we have. And I think if that hasn't been looked at, it should be. Some literature says it could be as high as 80%. When actually,
Alex, question.
Yeah.
Why are we so deficient in magnesium? Can you give us an idea about that?
Yeah, so it all comes back to that over farming the soils again, and minerals in the soils, and magnesium is one of the most important ones. It's responsible for over 300 enzymatic processes in the body. It's critical for sleep. If you look at like how serotonin gets converted to melatonin, you need magnesium. Sometimes people who are feeling anxious and depressed are just low on magnesium, and yet it's not looked at. It's not, and it's so inexpensive. High quality magnesium is so inexpensive to try, very, very safe to try as well. It's just one of those things that I think everybody should at least consider introducing to their diets. The next thing obviously is vitamin D, especially if you're up here in the north. Vitamin D is essential for immune function and just overall health. And again, get a quality vitamin D, making sure that you're getting checked with your medical doctors to make sure your levels are okay, because you can take too much vitamin D. It's very hard here in the north to take too much, but you can. It's fat soluble. And then the other two supplements that are just critical, in my opinion, for overall health are just an overall multivitamin, mainly because we're not getting it from our foods anymore. The only exception really would be that if you sourced it from a local farmer that you knew was crop rotating, then maybe you can pull the multivitamin out at that point. And the last of all is an omega-3, so fish oils. And you've got to be careful on what fish oil you use. It is arguably a very adulterated raw material in the industry. But yeah, ensuring that your omega-3 status is good. And the reason for that is not because I just want you to start drinking fish oil, but if you look at how many omega-6s that we get in our diets compared to omega-3s, and it's not that omega-6s are bad, it's just that we have a lot of them. And the reason why we have a lot of them in our diets is because they last long on the shelf in the supermarket. And so they can extend shelf lives by using omega-6s, which is great for the cell, but it's not great for you. If you have too many omega-6s in your diet, then that leads to more what we call arachidonic acid production. And arachidonic acid is important in the inflammation cascade that happens when we get something inflammatory going on. So it's not that arachidonic acid is bad. It's just that when you have an overabundance of something in your body, that's not necessarily a good thing. So if we can offset some of that by supplementing more omega-3s in somebody's diet, and avoiding some of those omega-6s if you can. It's very hard to these days. Hence, supplement those, pull down somebody's overall level of inflammation by competing for that enzyme activity in the body, and boom, person starts feeling a lot better. Their joints are a little less stiff, and they overall feel better. So,
okay. So, Alex, we have a question coming in from one of our frequent viewers who I'm always impressed by her intelligent questions and the insight that she has. And one of the things that she poses is the following. So what form of magnesium? There's so many. Can you help us with that?
Oh, absolutely. That is a fantastic question. It's like we met before this and set that question up.
We did not.
Not sure you didn't, but it's almost like you did. So a lot of the magnesiums on the market are magnesium oxides, and you'll see that, or magnesium citrates. Citrates are a little bit of a better form, actually, than an oxide form. But an oxide form is what causes a lot of the problems. And the reason is you have your magnesium molecule in your oxide or oxygen. And when that hits stomach acid, sometimes that oxygen molecule can get disassociated from the magnesium. When that happens, it creates an ionic charge. And what is induced? Loose stools. And so a lot of people will say, oh, I tried magnesium and I just kept on going to the bathroom all the time. It was terrible. So there's a few different ways we can get around that. One of them is by using what we refer to as mineral chelates. And essentially a mineral chelate is, most of the time we're bonding two amino acids to the magnesium molecule. There's a couple of different ways they can do that as well. But look for mineral chelates. So you'll see things like magnesium lysine glycinate or magnesium bisglycinate, things like that. Nice thing about those is they're very, very solid structures. And when they hit stomach acid, they don't disassociate. They stay very, very solid. The other thing is magnesium citrates. Yeah, they do actually have their place. They can be pretty good. Again, you don't want to dose too high, otherwise you can induce loose stools. And then malate forms of magnesium are good as well, because they can feed directly into the Krebs cycle, which is important for energy production, things like that. So my advice to people, if I was to give advice directly, would be to look for a magnesium product that has a little bit of a blend of those raw materials in it, but make sure that most of that magnesium product is in a chelate form, because that's where you're going to get your most benefit from, and highest level of what we would refer to as efficacy from that. Does that make sense?
Definitely. So to this end, we are not trying to badmouth anybody. However, what supplements are not as good as they are touted to be? For instance, she made mention of fish oil, and I'm sure there's some wide variances with this. Maybe it's fish oil, maybe there's some other things. Can you give us some ideas about some things that are touted as like, oh, you should do this, but you really need to be critical as a consumer and as a patient who's trying to figure out how to be able to improve your health?
Absolutely. So oxides is, we were talking about mineral oxides. It's not just magnesium. There's several other mineral oxides. So if you see a one-a-day multivitamin, I've never found a one-a-day multivitamin that's therapeutic. I just don't see how you can be therapeutic with one a day. And often those products, they have a lot of oxides in them. The second thing is avoid tablets unless the product is in a tablet form for a specific reason. So there are some reasons why you would keep a product in a tablet form. But other than that, tablets are just cheaper to manufacture, and that's why manufacturers do it. And so the issue with tablets is they don't get broken down as well in the gut. And so there's actually some pretty top-selling brands on the market. I'm not going to get specific names. They actually had to remove their logos from their vitamin supplements because they were being found in sewage grates, and so they were getting criticized on that because they weren't even getting broken down, which is crazy. The third thing that I would encourage everybody listening to this to look at is, if you are taking a fish oil, what type of fish oil are you taking? And the reason why I say that is a lot of fish oils on the market are high in oxidative status. You'd know that because when you swallow it, you get a fishy burp afterwards. If you're getting that from your fish oil, stop taking it. That's my number one thing. Shouldn't be taking it. It's not that that's necessarily bad for you. It's just that those oxidants in there you could really do without. I analogize it to eating barbecued meat. It tastes great, and once every while it's fine. But if you're going to eat barbecued meat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you're going to have to consume a lot of antioxidants to offset all those oxidants that you're taking from that smoked meat that you're taking in. Fish oil is almost the same way. If you're taking in an oxidative fish oil, well, you're going to have to somehow offset that oxidative status. So high quality fish oils. The other thing is you need to take less with a high quality fish oil. The third thing is, when you're looking at that fish oil, look for what we would refer to as a triglyceride form. What that means is basically 3 fatty acids, glycerol backbone on it. Reason why I say that is that's how we get it in nature from fish. So this is the fish, we get a triglyceride. We want our fish oil to look like a triglyceride as well. So it's in a bioidentical form. Just reason is higher bioavailability, more of a natural form that your body actually recognizes and knows how to use. And just so you know, Dr. Landrum and everybody listening, 99% of the fish oils on the market are not in that form, which is pretty shocking when you think about it.
It is pretty darn shocking, particularly in terms of like how patients are going to take it under the assumption that they're doing themselves. They've done their due diligence, that they are hopefully improving, and it's not really resulting in what it is that we're hoping for. So to that end, what's a common myth about supplemental therapy that you can debunk for us, please?
So one of the myths that you always hear is that supplements don't work. Like I shared the first beginning years of my life, that's how I saw it. My background is actually engineering. So I was a professional engineer for 12 years, studied civil engineering at school. And
so hold on a minute, Alex, I got to interrupt. That had to be a huge jump from like engineering and what, happens in the formative of thought from engineering to then doing this. And to as much as you feel comfortable, frequently we have people share their why, what motivated them to consider doing this, because that makes a huge difference in terms of not only how you approach the world, but also the type of impact that you have. So if you don't mind, can you tell us what motivated you from engineering to this? Give me.
No, absolutely. I'd love to share with people that, what I do now is kind of interesting. I just see it as engineering the body or helping doctors do that. But 12 years of that. My wife fell very ill at the end of 2014. At beginning of 2015, her BMI, which is your body mass index, was down to just over 16. Her hair was thinning out, very, very thin, skinny as a rake, and just was able to absorb very, very little. And actually had a very rare swallowing condition as well, where she couldn't get food down. And we have 4 children, and it was a very stressful time in my life, and a year of my life that really I don't want to ever live again. Thank you. But it got me digging into the nutritional side of things and just digging into why and how the human body works. And I found it really fascinating. What was also really fascinating is my wife got connected with a doctor here, and I live in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and she got connected with a doctor here that was open to some of these nutritional strategies and looking at the body as a whole, a little bit how you're looking at inflammation and joints, and there's a little bit more to the picture. And so what that doctor started doing was changing her diet and her lifestyle, excluding certain foods and including certain foods, and just changing up the way she lived. And we thought we were living a pretty healthy diet before, but what we realized is there are lots of components of our diet that weren't healthy, you know, sugar consumption, for example, and omega-6 fatty acid consumption that we didn't realize was just bad for us. So we changed a lot of those things, and within 3 months, the difference was just phenomenal. I couldn't believe it. So that got me then searching, to see what I could learn about supplements and nutrition and health and lifestyle. And I actually got myself signed up for just a wellness visit at one of these doctors as well, and started working on myself. And during that process, I just thought, you know what, I wonder whether there's anybody around in the industry that has any job openings right now. And the company that my wife was taking the supplements from had a job opening. And I thought, what the heck, I'll just apply and see what happens. And next thing I knew, I thought, I've got the job. So my colleagues at work thought I was just basically going to go and sell vitamins for the rest of my life. And I had to reassure them that no, I was going to help train medical professionals and teach about health and nutrition to people, which is really what I do. And it's been a lot of fun, been a big journey. We've eventually found out what was wrong with my wife in the process of my job as well. And I've been able to help, I think, thousands of people get better, which is just cool. I love waking up for work each morning because I go out and I think, well, how am I going to help this doctor today? And what questions do they have that I can help them with? A lot of fun.
And I think that that's huge. And Alex, I mean, you really undersell yourself a lot. You know, when you came into my office, I was listening to you and I was really connected to what it is that you're saying. And then as I listened to you more, you taught me more. You know, and I'm pretty sure, although that's not what the company's supposed to tell you, but many times physicians are learning. And if they're open, they can become better than what they have been before. And this type of therapy is really not something that is going to have a lot of detrimental effects towards patients, you know.
Right.
Even if it doesn't impact you as greatly as what we hope for, it has nothing but upside. And so, you know, as some docs really start looking at this with a critical eye and say, how can we measure where you're at before, as opposed to just saying, we're just going to give you a supplement and then just see how you feel, but also be able to say, can we evaluate this? Can we understand it? And then quantitatively, how we've been able to assess this. And it adds to a practice that historically just really wouldn't normally do some of these things. And so, you know, I think your value that you help not just the patients, but medical practices be better than what they were before you walked in the door. So to that end, I guess one of the things that I would ask is 2 things. What do you wish you knew before you started this whole journey? And then what are some of the topics that you're most curious about right now?
Wow. So what I wish I knew before I started this journey, I know this is going to sound just very, very basic. I wish I knew about vitamin D. And the reason is ever since I discovered really what it does and I've been taking it, I just rarely get sick anymore. I take it all the way through the winter and the summer. I increase my dosage a little bit in the winter, and everybody's different, so you have to kind of tune it in. But I wish I knew that before, because 2 things. One, I would always get sick in the winter. It didn't matter what I did. I would always get sick 2-3 times. The last 2 winters, maybe had 1 cold. Everything before that, I always got sick. The second thing is I get a lot of seasonal depression, especially around this time of the year. And since I've been taking vitamin D I don't get seasonal depression. So obviously there's a little bit of a correlation there in terms of those two things. So yeah, very interesting. What am I interested in studying right now? Actually, digging into a lot of post-viral stuff. I mean, probably for obvious reasons, but really trying to learn how can we deal with post-viral situations? How can we help from a natural point of view, increase just natural circulation and just general people's health? So really digging into that whole cardiovascular system and learning how that works, and how can we break down things like fibrin in the arteries that would otherwise just keep on building up and plaque and cause future problems. And I think a lot of practitioners right now are wanting to be proactive and say, you know what, maybe if we start addressing some of these things now, we can avoid future situations. And one of the blessings that's really come out of this whole world health situation that's hit us all very, very hard, one of the blessings in disguise is that at least it's getting people to start thinking about, what can I do to be healthier in the future and avoid, a bad situation, or have a better quality of life when I'm 70 or 80 years old. And that's a good thing, I think. So that's where my research is going personally. It's sort of digging into that and digging into some of those mechanisms. And I'm excited to be able to share that with people like yourself once I learn it.
Okay, so we have more questions coming in from our audience.
No.
They're really revving and ready to go. And so one of the questions that is posed is, so do we add one supplement at a time to be able to evaluate or assess efficacy, so you know what's really working? What's your thought process about that? Or do you do some things in mass where you can make assumptions that perhaps maybe all these things cumulatively might have more of an impact? Any thoughts?
Yeah, and that is a very good question, and you can kind of approach that from a couple of different angles as well. If you specifically know what's going on, so let's say I was a doctor, and I knew specifically what was going on with my patient because I had blood work that supports it. I had a physical diagnosis that supports it. I've looked at that patient and I know this is what's specifically going on. I want to try the following therapies. In that situation, I'm a big fan of multiple therapies at once that are research-based, that we know, hey, if we add in these botanicals and we also add in a fish oil and we add in a probiotic, that we're going to get to where we need to get to. When it's research-based, great. I'm absolutely fine out the gates doing that. However, I do think you need to be a little careful if you're starting to get to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different supplements that you're starting to take, and you're just adding in things for the sake of it, and not really knowing what's helping where and when. That's why I think and I feel that supplementation should be done with a doctor. Find a good doctor that you're working with that actually knows what to add in and where, rather than self-treating and self-diagnosing and, I tried some vitamin D, magnesium, and some spinach, and I took them all at the same time, and I'm not sure what's helping, but I feel a lot better. That's where the help of a medical professional can come in to really guide you and say, yeah, no, actually, it's probably that's really, really helping. Let's pull these two out and just keep you on that for a while.
So to that end, and I know that you want to make this a little bit company agnostic, but that's something that your company does do that's a bit different than many other companies, does it not?
Yeah. So I try and keep things agnostic, as you know. But yeah, the company I work for is a company called Ortho Molecular Products, and what we do is we basically only sell through medical professionals. And one of the primary reasons why we do that is we feel that the best way to get good nutrition and good supplementation into patients' hands is through a doctor. It's through lifestyle augmentation, because it's not just about the supplement. It's about the other therapies and the lifestyle augmentation that goes around it. And when you're working with a medical professional and they understand the body systems that have been affected by something like turmeric root or broccoli seed extract, or something like that, then they can better adjunct other therapies and lifestyle augmentation to go with that. So, for example, if you're struggling with stress, you'll read online, take ashwagandha. Well, ashwagandha probably will help, but there may be some other herbs that the practitioner you're working with knows that will help. But shouldn't you also be outside for half hour each day? Shouldn't you maybe be doing some moderate exercise? Shouldn't you be going to bed at the same time? Should you be getting off blue light devices? I mean, all of these different things that medical professionals, they know. They study these things. They know that. They know how the body works as a whole. And so we feel, actually, as a company, it's not just me personally, but as a company, that supplementation should really be taken under the guidance of a doctor, or some kind of medical professional, that knows that. It could be a nutritionist as well, or nurse practitioner. But yeah, any medical professional that understands it and understands how it's working. It's very important, I think.
Okay, so as we start to wrap up and as we're coming up on an hour, if you could have a billboard with anything on it in terms of being able to kind of give insight about supplemental therapy, what would it be and why?
Maybe my billboard would say, take more magnesium. I mean, just the deficiencies are so low. I mean, if it wasn't supplementation, it would probably be make sure you're drinking enough water and taking enough magnesium together. I think those two things would help solve a lot of chronic medical conditions actually here in the US. And I think a lot of people be surprised that what a couple of magnesium capsules can do for your health.
But the right kind of magnesium.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because, as I explained before, you take an oxide and you just, all you're going to do is go to the toilet a lot and not be able to utilize it. So yes, drink more water, take enough magnesium, and take the right kind of magnesium. I don't know how that slogan would look. Any ideas?
I think we could find something catchy.
Yeah.
We could find something to work out. So, and I think that's a great take-home point. Alex, so let me just ask you, are there any resources that you might have for patients so they can become more learned in this topic? Because clearly we got a lot of information that are coming in, from turmeric to chondroitin to collagen to magnesium. Any place where they can be able to go to learn a little bit more?
Yeah, so most of the materials that we have or that we talk to practitioners about are practitioner specific. So we have a sister company called the Lifestyle Matrix Resource Center, and they are actually a practitioner-specific organization that provides practitioners with materials that they need. But other than that, there are some great podcasts that you can listen to. I mean, Rhonda Patrick, for example, Found My Fitness, great podcast. There's a friend of mine, I'll give him a little bit of a plug here. His name's Dr. Robert Fredrickson. He does something called Fredrickson Health Solutions. It's a podcast. It's great. Again, neutral sources that have some great information about general health on there. I also listen to something called The Evolution of Medicine, which is a podcast by a gentleman called James Maskell. He's not a medical professional. He's actually from the UK, like me. And he just has a passion about transforming medicine as a whole in the Western world. And so he's got influence here in the United States and in the UK and Europe. So Evolution of Medicine is that. So any of those sources, if you can listen to them, are just great sources of overall health information. So yeah, check them out, definitely. And again, if you're going to go down this route, find a medical professional to work with to get the best results. That's it. That's the show. It's good to listen to.
Okay. Well, Alex, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here with us. Hopefully you can join us sometime in the future, and maybe we can talk about a specific supplement and kind of really drill down into some of the nuances of that
We'd
and
love
how
to.
that might be, thank you, the value, that would be present. For those people who come to our channel, we really appreciate everyone who comes to see us. What we really love for you to do is, if you have interest and you want to learn more about some of the things that we do, please sign up for our newsletter. We'll give you insight not only within the context of video, but also within the elements of the written word. And if you want to find this actual recording or some of our other recordings, please sign up for our YouTube channel that you can see listed below. That will give you the full insight about what we do, how to be able to punch pain in the face, and get back to leading the life that you deserve. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day.